Students, in lesson 11.5, we are going to work on classifying three-dimensional figures. Our essential lesson for this question is, how can you identify, describe, and classify three-dimensional figures? So we're going to start with the unlock the problem. A solid figure has three dimensions: length, width, and height. Polyhedrons, such as prisms and pyramids, are three-dimensional figures with faces that are polygons. A prism is a polyhedron that has two congruent polygons as bases. So we see that this equilateral triangle is an example of that. A polyhedron's lateral faces are polygons that connect with the bases. The lateral faces of a prism are rectangles. A prism's base shape is then used to name the solid figure. The base of this prism is a triangle, so the prism is a triangular prism. So we're going to start here for the first problem where it says, identify the base of the prism and then use the terms in the box to correctly name the prism by its shape. So if we look at the base, which is highlighted in green here, those are rectangles. So we're going to write down the prism base shape is a rectangle. And that we're going to write down that it is a rectangular prism. So I'm going to write it over here, rectangular prism. Next, we're going to look over here on the side. We see that the base is a pentagon. So the base shape here would be a pentagon. And then the name of this would be a pentagonal prism. Next, if we look at this base shape here, and shaded in green, is a hexagon. So we're going to write down that it is a hexagon. If we go back up to our list, we'll see, oh, I should have crossed those out as we went through. Rectangular prism we used, and we used pentagonal prism, and then the next one is a hexagonal prism. So we're going to write that down as a hexagonal prism. And next, on the last figure, we see that the base on the top in green and on the bottom is a octagon. So we're going to write down that the bases are an octagon and that the solid figure is an octagonal prism. Now remember, students, these are all prisms because they are polyhedrons that have two congruent polygons as bases. The example here was the rectangles. The example here was our pentagons. The example here was our hexagons, and the example in the last one was our octagons. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about pyramids. A pyramid, students, is a polyhedron that only has one base. The lateral faces of the pyramid are a triangle that meet in a common vertex. So, like a prism, a pyramid is named for the shape of its base. So we're going to be using the base to name the shape. So next it says, identify the base of the pyramid and then use the terms in the box to correctly name it. So the base in these examples is shaded in a light lavender color, purplish color, and that's what we're going to name first. So we see that the first one is a triangle base. And then we go over to our list and we see that would be a triangular pyramid. Next, we go on to the next, and we see that the base here is a rectangle, and this would be considered a rectangular or square pyramid. So some people might see it as a rectangle, and some people might see it as a square, so we could call it a rectangular pyramid, or we call it a square pyramid. Lastly, we see that the base here is made out of a pentagon, and the name of this figure would be a pentagonal pyramid. So remember, we could call this a square or a rectangular pyramid depending on people's perceptions of this base to see if it was a rectangle or a square. Students, the last three-dimensional figure that we're going to work on identifying today are called non-polyhedrons. And the prefix non means not polyhedrons. So some three-dimensional figures have curved surfaces. These solid figures are not polyhedrons. So anything that has a curved surface is not considered a polyhedron. So the first example we have here is a cone. A cone has one circular base and one curved surface. Next, we have a cylinder. A cylinder has two concurrent circular bases and one curved surface. And lastly, we have a sphere that has no bases and it has one curved surface. So next, we have the Venn diagram to sort the three-dimensional figures that are listed on the left. So non-polyhedrons, which we should probably start with because we just worked on them last, would be placed in this purple bin. So we know that a cone is a non-polyhedron. So we're going to write it down here. We also know that cylinders are non-polyhedrons. And we know that spheres are non-polyhedrons. Now polyhedrons, we know that we have two different types. We have prisms, which is one classification of polyhedrons. And then we also have pyramids, which is another classification of polyhedrons. So as we can see, students, throughout this chapter, geometry is a lot of reading comprehension. We're analyzing the character traits like we would in reading of a character, but we're doing that for flat shapes, and now we're going on today into three-dimensional shapes. So it's probably a really good idea to make yourself note cards of the different types of figures that we went through today. The three types of figures we did were pyramids, polyhedrons, and non-polyhedrons. On one side of your note card, you could draw a picture of the figure with the different types of bases they have, and surfaces, and lateral faces. And then the other side, you could write the definition, which are given throughout these different example problems that we completed together.